Roll up for the Magical Mystery Tour. We are kicking off the Magical Mystery Tour detailed listens. It's going to be a lot of fun. I have my score here. I have everything ready to go. First, I have already done my first listen, obviously, or I wouldn't have known what to say there. And first, we are going to watch my first listen of the first song. Unfortunately, on YouTube, I can't put it there. But for the rest of you, and for anyone who wishes to, it will be on Ko-fi and Patreon. Okay, so let's start with a bit of background info and details about the piece. What could possibly... Oh, by the way, the official genre classification is psychedelic rock for this particular song. What could possibly happen next after Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band? That's a good question. Should the Beatles be expected to take their audience on yet another journey next time round? Well, before the first journey was unleashed upon the public, Paul McCartney had already envisioned the next experience the group was to unveil. In harmony with the summer of love mentality of the times, Paul sought to take us all on a magical mystery tour where anything can happen. Well, I won't comment more at the moment about how successful this mystery tour was in comparison to Sgt. Pepper's, but that's something we might be discussing along the way. Just after the completion of the recording for the Sgt. Pepper album, Paul decided to pay a surprise visit to Jane Asher on her 21st birthday on the 5th of April, explains Barry Miles in his book Many Years From Now. Paul had his movie camera with him, and it was 2 days later, while filming in a Denver park, that he came up with using a mystery tour as the basis for a television special. Ideas fell quickly into place and it became a magical mystery tour, a typical Beatles combination of northern working class culture and taking the fans on an acid trip. As to John Lennon's involvement in the song's writing, he informed Playboy magazine in 1980 that it was Paul's song. I helped with the lyrics, but it was Paul's concept. Paul also told of John's involvement in authorship, saying, Magical Mystery Tour was co-written by John and I, very much in our fairground period. And that's one thing I've noticed about this opening piece, in fact, is, we could kind of put it in the same category as being for the benefit of Mr. Kite, the idea of this sort of carnival atmosphere. I can't quite say that it also fits with something like, let's say, the only words coming to me right now are Sky of Blue and Sea of Green. The Yellow Submarine. Yellow Submarine. Somehow, Yellow Submarine is different, although we could find a lot of similarities. But just the atmosphere, the attitude, this feels more consistent with something like being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. A little bit more melodramatic and grown-up playground. John and I remember mystery tours, Paul continues, and we always thought this was a fascinating idea, getting on a bus and not knowing where you were going. Rather romantic and slightly surreal. All these old dears with the blue rinses going off to mysterious places. Generally, there's a crate of ale in the boot of the coach, and you sing lots of songs. It's a charabanc trip. So we took that idea and used it as a basis for a song and the film. Well, I haven't seen the film yet. That will come at some point in the future. But this idea, a mystery tour, you hop on a bus, you have no clue where you're going, with a bunch of other people. And, well, where is it going to be? It used to just be called a mystery tour up north, Paul explains. When we were kids, you'd get on a bus and you didn't know where you were going, but nearly always it was Blackpool. Kind of predictable. From Liverpool, it was inevitably Blackpool. And everyone would go, oh, it was Blackpool after all. Everyone would spend time guessing where they were going, and this was part of the thrill, and we remembered those. So in a way, it is kind of a throwback to a childhood memory, like quite a few of their songs have been. In fact, spoiler alert, since I listened to the whole album already, I'm aware that this is the album on which are both Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, which are also throwbacks to childhood experiences and memories. And so if they're building this opening song off of a similar idea, it's kind of a nice consistency, isn't it? Well, let's get started and see where we find ourselves on this magical mystery tour. Right off the bat, we have this wonderful da-da-dum, da-da-dum, brass. And in my first listen to this album, I noticed the prominence they placed on the brass several places throughout the album. It's kind of like in Sgt. Pepper's, we heard all variety. That was a whole potpourri of instruments. But if I were going to think of which instruments kind of felt like a special flavor added, I would say it would be the strings in something like She's Leaving Home, and then the sitar, whatever Indian instruments that also featured in several songs as well. And now here in Magical Mystery Tour, it's different. It's more, well, in Sgt. Pepper's, there was brass, but it didn't feel like such a special thematic element. It was more like, oh, we throw it in for a certain mood on a certain piece. But now here, from the first blasts coming out of the speaker, we have brass. And it really set the stage and named the experience for me as a brass-themed experience. And that is what really stuck in my musical memory as I went through the album piece by piece. So I feel like it's worthy of noticing here and commenting and bringing attention to the fact that the first thing we hear is brass right off the bat. Not guitar, okay, there are drums under there, but it's all about the brass, isn't it? Not terribly unlike All You Need Is Love, the opening to that, which is such a fanfare style, and well, of course, it was the French national anthem that they used. And here, we kind of have that same sort of triumphant, excited, not quite so march-like, but still it is fanfare-esque. Again, it goes kind of into the excitement of an outing, a carnival-style experience, which works for the opening of Magical Mystery Tour. It's not really mysterious sounding, though, is it? It's not trying to set a mysterious mood. It's more, it's a bright, sunny day. We're all out on the street. The bus is rolling up. Everybody's excited. Where are we going? It's going to be a fun outing. That sort of atmosphere. So it's not the mystery, it's the excitement. Another consistency between Sgt. Pepper's and Magical Mystery Tour, and that is that the opening piece on each album uses more of this declamatory calling out, not so much singing in the voice. I guess with Sgt. Pepper's it was, well, let me introduce to you, and so on and so forth. Now it's roll up for the Magical Mystery Tour. And then, of course, everybody chimes in on the chorus. Roll up! Right this way. This roll up for the Mystery Tour. Something about the way they have placed the rhythms and what Ringo is doing with the drums. Just bang, bang, bang. It's a sound that I have, it's a certain feel that I have come to associate very closely with the Beatles. There have been times when I called it kind of, well, I guess I've used words like lumpy, bumpy, or kind of awkward. It doesn't always come out that way, but it's the way that he sets such a rock solid beat that is kind of, I don't know if I would call it heavy, but it's very strong, certainly not light-footed. At the same time, we have the voices singing a sort of loose roll up for the mystery tour. Is it dotted? Is it swung? Is it a triplet? Is it syncope? You know, it's a very fluid sounding rhythm within that sentence, a very natural speech pattern. Roll up for the mystery tour. It's hard for us in the first listen or two to put our fingers on exactly what that rhythm is, because it's meant to feel very natural and unmeasured. And I guess the thing that I notice about it is how incredibly measured Ringo's drums are. And his choice of drumming accents that really consistent, measured aspect. And then the voices above it are giving the impression of such an unmeasured feel that there's always this sense of rhythmic tug-of-war, a sort of rhythmic dissonance between the two. I've talked a lot about harmonic dissonance. This is something that I have come to, and I just noticed it again on this song, and I thought, you know, that's something I haven't really talked about a whole lot in detail. The fact that there is a sort of rhythmic dissonance between these two elements, and the fact that they are placed so prominently together creates this feeling of, it doesn't quite feel settled. It doesn't really agree. We're not settled into a groove, a beat pattern. Neither are we being soothed into something. It's not flowing. It's very much like, well, in this case, it works incredibly well to kind of portray or convey the feeling of unsettled, transitional state of being. If you're in a crowd that's kind of milling about as the bus rolls up, and you know you're not settled in your seat, it's this feeling of it's not chaos, but it certainly isn't relaxed. And it's that, I don't know how many of you have this feeling. It's the same feeling I have if I am traveling and I want to get somewhere. Let's say I'm traveling to Europe because we have family in Europe. I want to travel to Europe and I have my mind set on getting to Europe, right? But there's this whole travel between, which is always somehow just not settled, uncomfortable, not in a bad way, but it's not the feeling of comfort. And that's how I feel like this particular Beatles fingerprint of rhythmic dissonance is being used so well here in this opening piece. And as we go through the piece, it's fun to see how it develops and changes. Now already this rhythmic element is developing. What do we have here with the brass? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm not a brass player. I can't do it so well as if I were to bring someone in here who plays brass. Then they could demonstrate that without getting their mouth mixed up. Okay, so that rhythm is so organized and so progressing towards a moment. And there we are. And right back into this da-ba-bop rhythm of the opening, which was the sort of fanfare-esque rhythm. But we don't feel it quite so much because now this melodic material, if we can call it that, what the voices are saying, is settling into a bit more consistent rhythm. We have these triplets here. Ya da 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 da. Waiting to take you away. Waiting to take you away. And it helps to make it feel a little bit more dramatic, no, I wouldn't say more dramatic, but kind of like coming to a conclusion, maybe a climactic moment, a moment of here we are. Oh, by the way, when they sing Roll Up, my first time listening to it, it took me a moment to realize, because I wasn't following the lyrics closely, roll up, I thought they were saying voila or voila, and I thought, okay. And actually, this is one of the moments where I feel like the music is saying, we've been saying roll up, magical mystery tour, waiting to take you away, voila, there we are. That's what the music is doing in this moment. And here comes the bus, right? I almost feel like rolling my eyes in this moment. Like, okay, this really does go towards something like being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. The sound effects, it is so carnivalesque, almost cartoonish, really, almost cartoonish. They are pushing it to the max here with all the stuff they're throwing in, as if they want to make it as exploit every bit of the stereotypical experience and throw it in our faces and say, yeah, here's a cartoonish illustration of what's going on. Kind of funny. I feel like they came incredibly close to overdoing it for this opening song on the album. It almost feels like, to me, it almost feels too much. But okay, we'll allow them to have their fun, because that's the whole point. And again, thinking back to something like All You Need Is Love. Again, they're in this stage of just going over the top. I remember watching the video of that performance and thinking, balloons and whatnot, they have everything, signs parading around. This is not a street protest. This is in a recording studio. So again, it's this sort of love of, let's push it to the max and let's just have fun. And we don't care whether it comes across as tasteless or not. We are just out having a blast with all of this stuff that we can do it. So why not do it? What are they doing there? They've completely changed the feel. And it happened so smoothly. It took us a moment to recognize that we were really changing. It almost sounded like a cadence, a resting point. Dum on da da dum, ba ba bum, bum. Wait, what happened? And in this moment, it reminds me of classical pieces, some of the classical pieces that are designed to portray a journey. I'll just take a famous one. I guess I've mentioned it on this channel several times, and that is Smetana's Moldau piece of music, which is telling the story, painting the picture of the Moldau River from its origins as two streams coming down, and then as it travels, we pass, I guess, a village dance, all different scenes along the river. And so there are sections of very different moods and feels along the way. And that's what starts happening here. So as much as I feel like they almost overdid it in the opening part, they managed to pull us out of it quickly enough. Now, wait, what are we doing? Watching the scenery passing, the bus is rolling, there's this sort of smooth feeling that has suddenly happened. I guess we've taken our seats and now the bus is rolling along, and it's not at all the same sort of blasting announcer telling everyone to find their seats, welcome to the tour, overly enthusiastic. Now, here we go. Notice that long and how do they make it feel like this? As I said, the long sustained chords in the same instrument that was blasting out these dotted rhythms and rapid repeated notes. Bum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. That triplet there is such a nice touch. Well, I just talked about how the triplets were being sung in the voice. And so what actually happened, one of the reasons that this seemed so imperceptible in the moment it changed, is because the voice was using triplets as we were arriving at the grand voila to get us there. And now, as we are settling in dum, da 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 dum, the wheels are rolling, we're just traveling across the pavement so smoothly, da 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 dum. That triplet rhythm is put to another kind of use. That is to smooth things over and make it feel like it's just gliding along gently. Really a creative approach to setting the atmosphere here. They've used some really common sense material, which is the rhythmic material, but they did it incredibly well, didn't they? Pop, 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 pop. Actually, I think the drums are a little bit different than they were at the beginning, but it's back to this sort of banging on sheet metal feel, which is far different from when we were just rolling along. I guess now, rather than looking out the window, maybe we are looking around inside the bus and realizing, we're all together, the magical mystery tour, maybe making conversation with our neighbors. The excitement inside the bus now is happening. Dum, bum, bum, bum. Right. We've been in a pretty square 4 beats to a bar all along. It starts with a fanfare, then it transitions, different feels, but still 4 beats to a bar. And now there's some funny stuff happening with the tempo and the rhythm, everything. Let's back up a little bit again and just try to process what's going on together. 1, 2, 3, 4. What just happened? I was counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it stayed pretty much consistent with the tempo I was counting. Except the voices changed their pacing. They are digging in, leaning into this triplet feel. The magical mystery tour is coming to take you away. And what we have here is a wonderful cross rhythm layering of 2 different types of rhythm. We have the brass, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have the voices as well. So the voices are doing triplet, 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 triplet. Well, we can cut the 1, 2, 3, 4 in half. All right. Now we can say it's 1, 2, 1, 2, which means we have triplet and 1, 2. All right. We have a whole beat. Let's say we have what shall we say? A piece of string. Fine. We can even take this pencil. We can cut it in half and have 2 equal pieces. We can cut it in 3 and have 3 equal pieces. And if we have 2 pencils, we can stack those one on top of the other. And one is divided in halves, the other is divided in thirds. And the division points don't match up with each other, do they? But we end up with a whole beat. That's what's happening here. And the brass are keeping the 1, 2, 1, 2, the halves going, while the voices are doing the thirds. Triplet Magical Mystery Tour. And so everybody arrives at the significant beat points, beat 1 and the halfway point, together on Mystery and Tour. But in between, they don't match up. And it feels like we're putting on the brakes, because normally when you take 2 and you divide it musically, you end up with 4, 2, and each half divided into half again. And so since we have only 3 in the voice, it feels like we've kind of stretched the beat a bit, even though we haven't actually. And, well, think of it like putting some marks on a rubber band, stretching the rubber band, and they spread apart. And we get that sort of sensation here going on, and it's a fun way of keeping the 4/4 beat going. At the same time, maybe the bus rolling. Magical Mystery Tour. So now we've layered both of these hyper-exaggerated moods that we've felt in the piece. And they're happening at the same time. Suddenly, everybody went into the triplets. So suddenly it started being like, we could say, just a hint of a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because everybody's agreeing that just for a moment, because then they break up and isn't that fun? And how did we get here really? From pop 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 at the opening? Isn't it enjoyable to notice how along this piece of music, throughout this piece of music, as we're traveling through it, it is taking us on a rhythmic journey. It truly is. Take you away, take you to this sort of atmospheric, we could even say not really mysterious, but maybe magical. It doesn't quite give me the feeling of mystery, but this sort of magical world. What did we just enter into? Yeah, it could be sort of aquarium music, or it could be I don't know. You know those beady curtains that are kind of a shall we say yoga retreat or hippie thing, you know? You hang these curtains made of beads in the doorways, and you can walk through them, and maybe there's some plants around, and you know, the smell of whatever stuff is in the air. I somehow get the idea that this is like, oh, where did we end up? So, in spite of the fact that it is so hyper exaggerated, almost to the point of we can almost write it off and say it's just tasteless, ridiculous, over the top, dramatic, melodramatic, kitsch. We can throw out all the words we want. Campy. At the same time, it does get us started off in an incredibly enthusiastic and, blast us into whatever this tour is going to be. And as I'm throwing out all these words, I can't help but think of Queen in this context, because this is something which came up in my Queen 50 series several times. Can we write this off as just campy theatrical stuff, or should we take it a bit more seriously? And I think we can say yes and no. But somehow I feel like maybe Beatles paved the way for some of what Queen did a few years later, because this would actually be something that I could imagine Queen taking in this particular song, and taking and developing even to another level, adding some more complexities to it, maybe orchestrating it a bit more fully, or, it could be taken to the point of working on a stage, right? So, fun piece. It does set the tone for the album. Same sort of grand announcement with flamboyance and panache that Sgt. Pepper's did. And, well, let's see what comes next. As far as who is the fool on the hill, I'll see you then.